I'm Chad.Taylor, psychotherapist, author of It's You, Oh Fuck, It's Me. No tips, no fixing, just real conversations. So today I've got Janae here. Janae, who the fuck are you?
Well, hi everyone, and hi Chad. I am a sex and intimacy educator and coach. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I came to this work from being in a sexless marriage, living in a sexless marriage for 26 years.
Okay. Lived experience, which I think the world needs more of.
Definitely.
Rather than me going straight in and asking you the question about your sexless marriage, how did you turn that into where you are now?
Well, I think it was very, very aligned with your book, right? Which is like I had to take a really hard look at who I was when I left that marriage and where all of my own shame, trauma, and other wounding came from that, caused me to be in a marriage that had no sex and also not a ton of intimacy. And really like look at, well, who am I and where did that come from and what do I do about that? And rather than blaming my ex-husband, which I never really did, I knew it was like for me, on me, but I also didn't. I had no compassion for myself, no kindness for myself. So that really led me into, I was a lawyer by training. So I was in the sort of corporate healthcare world. I had my own consulting company. But when I left the marriage and really took a hard look at me and did the hard work, I realized that this was something that I was really passionate about, that as I saw changes happening in my life, that is really how I wanted to spend, if you will, the second chapter of my life, just really focusing on helping others who hopefully were able to get intervention way before I was. Let's put it that way.
I think we're very aligned. I'm obviously a clinical psychotherapist. So would you say that what demographic is your ideal client, or is there one?
I would say that right now, in the last 7 years, I've been really focusing on couples in long-term relationships. Sometimes it's a first marriage, sometimes it's a second marriage, sometimes it's a third marriage, but they're in some level of long-term relationship. And most often they're really struggling around sex or they're in a sexless marriage.
Yeah, and I guess I'll probably ask you that a bit later, but what's the correlation between intimacy and sex, and is there a difference, and how do you work with people on that?
Um, that's a great question. So I think they're very integrally related. It was interesting because I posted this on Facebook about a month ago. Like, you can have sex without intimacy, but can you have was it you can have sex without intimacy, but can you have intimacy without sex? Because I was really curious about what people's reactions would be in my community. And a lot of what I heard was yes, you can have intimacy without sex. It's more like emotional. You're more like friends. Maybe you're cuddling, but it's not sexual. And I don't disagree with that. I think there's a lot of different ways to experience. There's lots of different types of intimacy that you can experience. But in a long-term relationship with both couples, both partners actually want to be sexual with each other, then I think the sexual intimacy has to go along with the emotional intimacy. And in fact, I think it's very hard, especially for women, to really allow themselves to open up sexually unless they feel that emotional connection, that emotional intimacy with their partner. So I do think they're very integrally related.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for everybody, women and men. I know as a man, if there's something that I wanted to, it's a lot easier to do it with has been previously for me until the relationship that I'm in now, which is amazing because there's two of us that are both working on ourselves consistently. I go
Mm-hmm.
to a therapist, even though I'm a therapist. She goes to a therapist. But I guess what I see a lot of, and I think in my last relationships, is it's easier to be more open sexually with somebody you've just met than it is with a long-term
Initially,
partner because of that.
yes.
If I want to do something different and she rejects me, I've got to look her in the eye and I've got to hang around with her and I've got to parent her. If I want to, I don't know, buy a sex toy, if I want to, I don't know, ask her if we can dress up or wear a, it's not my thing, but wear a nurse's outfit or wear a French maid's outfit. I probably wouldn't mind that one. Sophie, if you're
Hmm.
listening to this, which is my partner, there you go. But what I'm saying is if I was to want to do that, say it was my birthday or her birthday and I want to do that and that's shut down or that's almost like, why the fuck would you want to do that? Like, aren't you happy with who I am? I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
I write a lot of this in my book. It's easier to be sexually open with somebody I've just met or somebody we've just met because there isn't that, well, intimacy, coming from into me, I see, which I'm sure you cover a
Right,
lot in your book, that it's that
right.
intimacy being that two people almost the deeper you get towards the other person, unfortunately, the deeper you're really going into yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. And yeah, I think you can have maybe better sex, more exciting sex, more friction sex, when you're not in a long-term relationship, maybe. But I think, that's also driven by hormones. That's driven by the fact that you're in new relationship energy. And if that connection isn't there after the new relationship energy goes away, right, then you're in a really different place, right? You haven't really established that connection. And yes, I definitely agree that I see that with a lot of couples, like sex is amazing in the beginning, and there's all this new relationship energy flowing. And especially if there are people who are a little bit more on the avoidance side, and then they actually make their way into more of a long term relationship, the actual intimacy is terrifying for them to allow themselves to be that vulnerable, to be that authentic, right? Ultimately, I think you're going to have a better sexual experience when there's a lot of intimacy with your partner. It'll be different. It can still be very exciting, but it'll be deeper and more passionate at a very core level. But it also requires a lot of emotional safety and trust.
Yeah. Even a simple thing as looking into your partner's eyes while you're having an orgasm. I don't think I'd want to do that with a stranger
Yeah,
personally, but I
right.
definitely think, yeah, there's a different type of great sex. I would,
Hmm.
I would like to say. And Sophie, again, if my partner's listening to this, we've been together about 4 years now, and I think it just gets better and better. The intimacy gets better and better because it isn't all about what it was in the first 3 or 6 months, like you talked about, that new relationship energy. And I think the world's full of dopamine, and I think that's why we have short term relationships because that first rush of doing all that stuff,
Right.
it's the rush is there, right? And it's a different now, 4 years in, it's a different kind of rush, but it's still a rush, right? But I don't think many
Yeah,
people can do the work to get to that point.
yeah, I agree with that. It
Well,
can be a struggle.
where can people find you?
Oh, they can find me at my website, which is Passionate Intimacy Retreats with an S.com, passionateintimacyretreats.com.
Great. And I will link that for people in the show notes if you like what Janae said and you'd love to connect with her for work or find out where her book's going to come out or where you can buy it, her books. I will leave that in the bottom of the show notes.
Awesome.
So I do a thing here where the last guest leaves something for the next guest. It's a question or a statement, just something to leave the next guest when they come on. And the last guest left,
Mhm.
which is right in line with you. What's something you wish you were better at in relationships?
Something I wish I was better at in relationships is it's still hard for me to be able to have hard conversations. I do it, but it's still, there's still fear. I have an attachment wound, an abandonment wound, right? So I'm always nervous. Like if I'm going to broach some hard topic with my partner, that going to be the thing that's going to make him decide, yeah, no, we've been together 4 years, 5 years now. So we're a year ahead of you. Is that going to be the thing that's going to make him say, yeah, no, I think I'm done? Never has happened, and I really don't think that would happen. But there's always that internal fear that I have. That's hard for me in a relationship.
And how have you worked on that yourself? Like how, without this turning into a therapy session, but I'll make it pretty raw and real here. How have you worked? How have you got to where you can be? I suppose the number one thing I'd say is, what's it like when you're aware of that? It's probably, I guess it would be easy to deal with in the moment when you're not
Mhm.
unconscious to those behaviors that you've probably had all your life, I'm guessing, in a way.
Right, right. I would say that it's gotten a lot easier for me to be able to have those hard conversations. I think I'm in a pretty secure relationship, maybe the most secure relationship I've ever been in at an emotional level, and that we trust each other. And I know that we've had hard conversations before and it made us closer. Right. And that's for me, one of the values of learning how to actually repair conflict is if you do it correctly, it actually creates more intimacy. So I know that it will end up, even though it might be hard and I might upset him and he might not use the skills that I think he should use in that moment and become very defensive or I feel invalidated, like I still know it's worth it doing it. So I think that's a part of it. And at times I do some parenting of myself. Like, yeah, that was then, this is now, you were 3 years old, you're not anymore. And just reassuring that inner scared child, right? That this person who loves you and is living with you is not going to leave you.
Yeah.
So
And for anyone listening out there that hasn't done therapy or hasn't come to somebody like you, what does being a 3-year-old child have to do with being an adult in a relationship?
oh, yeah. So all of our childhood wounds, all of them, show up in our adult romantic relationships, right? And so for me, a major child wound that I had was an abandonment wound because my dad died when I was 3 years old. My mom never remarried. And so much of my romantic relationship, I stayed in maybe unhealthy relationships for 26 years because I was afraid of that little girl didn't want to be abandoned. And that's a big attachment wound. And so all of these childhood wounds we have, they all show up in the way in which we handle romantic relationships and the way in which we get triggered when we're in a conflict with our partner, right? Because when we're in a conflict with our partner, there's no adult in the room. There's usually only two children with their wounds that have showed up in the room, and you cannot repair in that moment. It's impossible. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. I was watching two guys fighting outside my office is one floor up and it's in a pretty small town. And I was watching two grown men obviously fight over a car park the other day. And I was thinking straight after that, and it's easy for me to judge and think, look at you, you idiot. But
Mhm.
I'm that person, right? When I'm triggered, that's me right there. When I'm running late for work or I've gone out for lunch and I need to come back and I've got a client and there's no car parks, that's me, right? But this time I had lunch after that and I try and usually close my eyes and practice a little bit of meditation and quiet time in my lunch break because my job is pretty intense, as I'm sure yours is. And
Mhm.
I thought, when's the first time I ever felt like that? And I have shared this before with somebody on the podcast. For anybody else, if somebody listening again, you're just going to have to deal with it. Sorry. But I thought games like musical chairs and things where I feel like we're almost taught or passed the parcel. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't play these games at childhood parties, but it's more about when you've lost and when you're triggered and you're over in the corner and you're being told you can't have an emotion, you can't get angry, can't get sad. It's just a game. I think that a lot of this, like I'm exactly like you in believing that 0 to 7, when our brain is in a different state, it's almost like a
Mhm.
sponge. All that's in
Mhm.
there, right? It's all in there. And when we're triggered, that a lot of that is trying to make its way out. It's actually trying to make its way out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does. It
Definitely.
does.
So I don't even really need to go into this next question too much because we've almost answered it, but I will. What from my book landed for you? What, in a personal way, where do you see some of these things show up in your own life and any examples you've got?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think your book is so focused on taking personal responsibility for your own stuff and your own issues and not blaming the other person, but actually owning up to your own stuff. So I think I try to be very conscious about what my own excuse me, my own stuff is. Yeah, I'll tell an interesting story. When I first met my partner 5 years ago, at our very, very first date, we had a great date. And at the end of the date, I said to him, I want to tell you all of the things that really makes it hard to be in a relationship with me. I actually think I said that makes it that sucks to be in a relationship with me. And then I listed like 5 or 6 things just to kind of see how he reacted to that. And also because I felt like it was important to get that out on the table. And also just to see, like, did he like freak out? Because that would be a red flag warning, like, yeah, we're not the right person, right? I think that really owning your own stuff with my couples, I always make them write down on a piece of paper all of the things that makes it hard to be in a relationship with you. And then when we get into talking about how to repair and how to talk to each other when you're in conflict or noticing what happens when your trigger is up, I'm like, okay, well, look at your sheet of paper. Let's identify what part of this is related to your own thing that you need to take ownership of, right? Like, I can't expect my partner to fix it, right? That's not their responsibility. Maybe their responsibility at times is to bring it to light. Sometimes, my partner will say, hey, Xanet, I think maybe you're getting a little defensive right now. You want to take a look at that? Or you're being a little judgmental. No, not me. Do you want to take a look at that? Right. Which I appreciate because in the moment I can't get there. But I do think what you say in your book about owning your own stuff, knowing what your own stuff is, because so many people don't understand what their own stuff is. They haven't done the work to understand where their wounding comes from, where their triggers come from, how the way their mother dismissed them when they were 5 years old had an effect on how they feel when they get criticized by a partner, for example. So really understanding that piece, I think, is just really, really critical to be able to stay in a healthy relationship, in a romantic relationship. I think it's also important for other relationships in our lives as well.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And something you said then was when your partner says you're getting defensive, maybe you should take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's when I hear that, and then I know how I process it in my life, and I hear how you process it in your life. This is the basis of the work that we're doing, right? It's the
Right.
way I see that play out most of the time is, oh, who's fucking defensive? That's usually the comeback from when it's
Yes.
called out, right? Or it's like, hey, I'm just
Right.
letting you know you're getting a bit angry. I'm fucking angry. You're fucking angry.
Yes. Our coping mechanisms immediately, come online. Yes. It's hard not to, right? It's definitely hard not to.
Definitely is. And something you said earlier about repairing conflict makes us closer, gives us more intimacy. The original name for my book before it changed, it morphed and did these things was called I'm Fucked, You're Fucked, Why Being Wrong is Foreplay. So it really was
Mm-hmm.
about the oxytocin and about not quite dopamine, but oxytocin that actually comes in when you admit fault. You almost,
Yeah.
let's call it, I'm not religious, but let's call it that type confession thing where you admit fault to your partner. The actual, the oxytocin and the level of closeness when two people
Mm-hmm.
are admitting fault rather than fighting and can make an apology or own their shit without the but.
Mm-hmm.
It's so nice when I have a disagreement with my partner, which is very, very rare. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
rare. Sometimes I've got to pinch myself. So I asked her to marry
Mm-hmm.
me. I wasn't going to get married. And a couple of weeks ago, I asked her to marry me because I thought this woman is the person I can grow with. She makes me grow every day. And she
Mm-hmm.
challenges me, but not in the boot camp type way of yelling at me and telling me what I need to do. And I think I do that for her,
Right.
which
Right.
is so important. But where do you think people like us, where do you think we can hide behind awareness, therapists? Where do you think sometimes we can hide behind our identity or who we think we are as in this sort of stuff? Do you think that's something we've got to be careful of?
I don't hide behind it for me personally. Like, I'm pretty good at owning up to my own stuff, but I struggle with not therapizing or coaching my partner. right? And we both see therapists as well. And we've been working with a couples therapist for a couple of years, just learning skills on how to be more vulnerable, how to be more authentic with each other, how to deal with conflict. I think for me, that's where I don't know that I hide behind it, but I could see that he would say, Xanet, you're therapizing me right now. I'm like, oh shit, you're right, I am.
And
Right.
are there
And
times when you don't
that's
catch that?
hard.
Because I want people to see on this that we're all real. Just that's what I say
Oh,
to my
yeah.
clients as soon as they come in. I say, just letting you know, even though I'm in this chair, I'm in that
Oh,
chair pretty
yeah.
regularly, like once a week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the time. And, and I say that with my clients all the time as well. Like, I'm certainly not perfect. I'm going to fuck up. I'm just telling you that right now. Right. Like, but yeah, I think that it's hard when he calls me out on that. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I can see that I might be doing that. But I have a lot more information. I could debate it. You know, I have a lot more information. I have a lot more skills. I can look at it from a different perspective, but it's a very narrow perspective. And we actually process at very different levels. Like, he's a lot more like intellectually and up in his head. And I try to really focus more on the emotional aspect of it. But I can be a good debater as well. We can litigate the facts. Let's just put it that way. And that's not very helpful as we've learned.
So good to hear too, so good to hear this stuff for me about, and I see it in my clients after they've been working on themselves for a while, that how important this is. And even as a therapist, what I try and say to my clients is because most people now are listening to podcasts and we think we've got it all right. We think yeah, I know that. I'll try and tell sometimes them something and it's like, yeah, I know that. I listened to it on here or yeah, I read that. Yeah, like, let's just skip over. I get that. And I sort of have to say to them, look, when I go to see my therapist every week on a Thursday afternoon, I've got to almost, as I walk in the door, I've got to say, okay, Chad, today you know nothing about therapy. Because otherwise,
Mm,
what I found myself doing early on was almost like I'm going to him with a problem and then he's therapizing me. And then I'm thinking how I would have worked with myself if,
right,
if I was in his position coming in for me. And it's like, this is just fucking ridiculous, Chad.
right, right, right. Yes. And I think that's why our styles are so different. But I like the way in which when we're able to like be in that space of just like, let's just talk about, well, let's not litigate the facts. Let's look at the conversation under the conversation. Like, what are the feelings that are really coming up for you when that happened, and what are the feelings that are really coming up for me when that happened, right? And I think for me that's the crux of creating that repair, is being able to both express your feelings, not be invalidated, and be able to empathize with each other, but also own that part of you that caused you to have those feelings and that trigger, right? Like, I know, I mean, I say that to him a lot, like, I know I have this abandonment wound. And when you are dropping your son off and you say you're going to come back in a half an hour or 45 minutes, and it's 3 hours later and you're still not back, I'm about to call the police because of this child who is completely not in her adult mind at that moment, but she's like a 3-year-old wondering what happened to her father, why he never came home or whatever it was, right? That is important, right? The whole cycle of empathizing, but also like understanding where that trigger comes from and looking at yourself and saying, wait a second, we got to like settle that down piece as well.
Yeah, and I love to hear that, a real life story from somebody and not be shamed about it. And also, I think there'd be two types of people out there listening to this. There'd be some listening thinking, well, that's not his responsibility, that's your problem, which I don't agree with. And then there'd be other people saying, well, he should have done this. And I think personally that if we're in a relationship with somebody, that we have like all therapy and all relationships are a form of reparenting, in my opinion, whether we want to
Totally
admit
agree.
it or not. So
Absolutely.
if you were my partner and I knew that you had these abandonment issues and I knew that this was an issue for you, like there's no fucking excuse people out there. I use this a lot. Like there's no excuse when your phones are on you all the time to
Mm-hmm.
send
The
a
text.
message that even says, I'm okay. Like really, how long does that take you? You can do it when you're driving. You shouldn't, but you could.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You could do it through voice to text, just letting you know I'm okay. Like it's not fucking hard, people. And that makes all the difference. And I'd use that. A lot of clients I get, when they're out drinking or partying, or, I get a lot of younger clients, which is great, in their late 20s, early 30s, which I love because
Mm-hmm.
there's a chance before the four relationships or the fifth marriage, right, that we're on. And I wasn't that person. I am on my sort of third serious relationship.
Yeah.
And I sort of say to the person, look, if you're out and you know your partner is a bit anxious, or she's home with the baby, or he's home with the baby, or whatever it might be, there's no excuse, because I say, I got drinking with the boys, and I'm going to use the men because I think they're worse at it. I got drinking with the boys. I
Mm-hmm.
just completely didn't think they might have checked in
Mm-hmm.
at 9 and said, yeah, I'll just have one more beer. And then 3 o'clock comes and he's got 33 missed calls and however many
Mm-hmm.
messages, because she's stressed. She's home with the baby. She's also stressed. Part of her wants him home, which is okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many
Yeah.
emotions going on here. And
Yeah.
then he gets
Yeah.
home drunk. Then he wakes up late the next day because he's hungover. And I say, there's no fucking excuse why you couldn't set an alarm on your phone at 7, at 9, at 11, at 12. When your alarm goes off, go to the toilet, send your partner a 2-second voice message, and everything's sorted. Like it's not fucking hard to communicate, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I
We've
agree
got
with
it.
that. No.
We've got our phones all the time.
Yeah, and I definitely, we're definitely on the same wavelength, which not all therapists are. I think in a healthy relationship, you are doing some parenting of your partner. I mean, that is like the interdependence, right? Of like when that little child is there, when that little girl is there, she needs like her daddy. When he's triggered, right? And is feeling not confident or whatever is showing up, like he needs nurturing as well, right? And I think that is an important part of being in a healthy interdependent as opposed to codependent relationship, right? But I agree. Some people are like, that's your shit. You've got to work it out. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's healthy.
And I don't think it can be done because it just makes us
Not
more and
not
more
well.
independent. And then when we
Right.
get in a new relationship and the same stuff blows up, like I really think I understand that we need time to ourselves to work on ourselves, but it's also to me a bit like learning to surf in a pool. Like you can paddle around and you can have the board and the wetsuit, but the waves are never the same, right? Like you can do all the work on
Right.
yourself out there, people, and then get in a relationship and think, fuck, wow, I'm not nowhere near as healed as I thought I was. Like it's the relationship is the actual training, right?
That's
The
absolutely right.
podcast and the stuff going on in the background is a bit of learning, but the real work happens in a relationship.
Yeah, and the most healing that can happen around your attachment style, all of that happens in the context of the relationship. That's well. I
Yeah.
100% agree with that. Yeah.
So it's been so great to have you here today. It's a quick run for people to listen to on their way to work or the way home or in their lunch
Thank you,
break.
Chad.
One sentence, question, statement. No teaching, just something we can leave the next guest, or you can leave the next guest.
I guess that would be a question. So my question would be, if there's one thing in your life that you could have done differently, what would it have been?
Great. If there's one thing you could have done differently in your life, what would it have been?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And that's where we'll leave it.